I was sitting on the edge of the couch, fingers tapping against my knees, staring at the check my parents had just handed to my sister. It wasn't a small amount, it was more than I'd ever seen them give me for anything, ever. And she accepted it with that calm, practiced smile, the one that always made it seem like she deserved everything without question. I felt a strange mix of anger and confusion, a tight knot forming in my chest. I wanted to speak, to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I watched her carefully fold the check into her wallet and glance up at Mom and Dad as if nothing was wrong. They beamed at her. They had always done that. Always told me she was more responsible. The one who could handle life without a reminder, without a nag, without a hint of doubt. And here I was, sitting with my own sense of inadequacy, wondering what exactly I had done wrong. I told myself it didn't matter, that money wasn't proof of worth, but it gnawed at me anyway. Every glance at the stack of bills felt like a silent judgment, like they were comparing me in real time, and somehow I was failing. And then she looked at me. That flicker of something, I couldn't tell if it was sympathy or satisfaction, passed across her face. My throat tightened. It wasn't just about the check. It was about everything it represented: approval, trust, their unspoken hierarchy that I had lived under my whole life. And for the first time, I realized I had no idea what had earned her this. Or if I'd ever be able to. Growing up, the word responsible followed my sister around like a title she'd earned before either of us even understood what it meant. If a glass broke in the kitchen, I got asked how it happened. If she broke one, my parents would just sigh and say she must have had a reason. That wasn't something they said out loud in a mean way. It was quieter than that. Just small patterns you noticed over time. She was older by 2 years, which probably helped. By the time I was figuring out middle school, she already knew how to navigate it. Teachers liked her. Neighbors trusted her to watch their kids. My parents mentioned it constantly, usually with a soft smile that somehow felt heavier than criticism. See? She plans things, Mom would say when my sister packed her bag the night before a trip. Notice how she finishes what she starts. Dad would add if I complained about homework. They never called me irresponsible directly. They didn't need to. The comparison did the work. The weird thing was, my sister never rubbed it in. She wasn't smug about it. If anything, she acted like the praise made her uncomfortable. Sometimes when Mom started another speech about setting an example, my sister would change the subject or leave the room. Back then I took that as modesty. Looking back, I wonder if it was something else. Still, despite everything, we weren't enemies. We shared rides. Late-night snacks, the occasional complaint about our parents. She helped me study for tests sometimes. Once she stayed up past midnight explaining math problems until I finally got it, but even in those moments, there was always that invisible line between us. She was the dependable one, and I was the one still trying to prove I could be. Despite the comparisons, my sister and I were never openly hostile. If anything, our relationship lived in that strange middle space where you care about someone deeply but never quite stop measuring yourself against them. When I was younger, she used to walk me home from school. Not because our parents asked her to, she just did. She'd swing her backpack over one shoulder and keep this steady pace like she had somewhere important to be, even when we didn't. I remember once asking why she always walked so fast. She shrugged and said, "If you move like you have a plan, people leave you alone." I didn't know what she meant at the time. In high school, she was the one people trusted with everything. Group projects, organizing events, tutoring sessions. If something needed to get done, someone eventually turned to her. Teachers said her name with that tone that meant certainty. Meanwhile, I floated somewhere in the middle. Not a screw-up, but never the example either. Oddly enough, my sister never treated me like the less responsible one. When my car broke down during my first year working part-time, she showed up with a toolbox and a flashlight before I even asked. She crouched beside the engine like she'd done it 100 times. "You should probably check the battery cables," she said calmly. I stared at her. "How do you know this stuff?" She wiped grease on a rag and just shrugged. "You pick things up." That was the thing about her. She was always picking things up, skills, responsibilities, expectations, like someone quietly stacking weight on their shoulders. At the time, I thought she liked it, but thinking back now, I'm not sure anyone ever asked if she did, and the older we got, the more that quiet pressure started to show in ways I didn't fully understand yet. The first time something about my sister's responsibility started to feel off was a few years after she moved out. She had a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy. Just clean, quiet, and organized in a way that made it feel like every object had been placed after careful thought. Even the kitchen drawers looked like someone had measured where every spoon should go. My parents loved visiting her place, see? Mom would say, looking around like she was touring a model home. She knows how to take care of things. I usually stayed quiet during those visits, leaning against the doorway while they admired the neat counters and perfectly folded towels. It was hard not to feel like the comparison was happening again. Even though no one said it directly, but what caught my attention wasn't the apartment, it was the phone calls. Every time we visited, her phone buzzed at least once or twice. She never ignored them. She'd glance at the screen, excuse herself politely, and step into the hallway or onto the balcony. At first I assumed it was work. She had some administrative job that sounded boring enough to require constant emails and calls, but the tone was different. Once, while grabbing a drink from the kitchen, I overheard her through the half-open balcony door. "No, I already handled that," she said quietly. Pause. "I told you not to worry about it." Another pause, her voice softened. "I'll take care of it. Just give me a little time." When she came back inside, she acted completely normal. Smiling, helping Mom set plates on the table, asking Dad about his weekend plans. No tension. No explanation. Later, in the car ride home, my parents kept praising how together she seemed. I nodded along, but that phone call stuck in my head, not because it sounded dramatic, because it sounded like someone carrying a problem no one else in the room knew existed. The first time I thought I understood what was really going on happened completely by accident. It was a Saturday afternoon. My parents had asked me to come over and help move a few things in the garage. Old boxes, random furniture, the usual weekend project that always took longer than anyone expected. While we were digging through dusty storage bins, my sister showed up unexpectedly. She walked in like she already knew exactly what she was looking for. "Hey," she said casually. "I need to grab a folder from Dad's old filing cabinet." Dad barely looked up from the toolbox in his hands. "Second drawer. Should still be there." She nodded and went straight to the corner of the garage where the cabinet sat. I didn't think much of it until I noticed how carefully she closed the drawer after pulling something out. Almost like she didn't want anyone seeing what was inside. Curiosity got the better of me. A few minutes later, while she was inside talking to Mom, I walked over and slid the drawer open. Inside were neatly stacked envelopes. All labeled with her name: bank statements, loan documents, transfer records. I flipped through a few before my stomach tightened. The numbers were big, way bigger than anything I'd ever borrowed or handled, and every single document connected back to my parents' accounts. I closed the drawer slowly, my mind racing. By the time she came back into the garage, she had the folder tucked under her arm and that same calm expression on her face. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The phone calls. The quiet conversations. The way my parents trusted her with money. In that moment, one thought settled into my head with uncomfortable clarity: my sister wasn't just the responsible one. She was the one managing their finances, and if that was true, it meant the check I'd seen earlier probably wasn't the first time they'd given her something like that. After that day in the garage, something shifted in the way I looked at everything. At first, I tried to convince myself it was logical. My sister handled money well. My parents trusted her. Maybe they were just asking her to help organize bills or investments. Plenty of families did that, but the more I thought about it, the less it sat right. The numbers I'd seen in those envelopes weren't small favors. Those were serious transfers, amounts that didn't look like simple budgeting help. It looked like control, and once the idea formed in my head, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Whenever my parents talked about financial decisions, repairs, savings, even vacations, they almost always said something like, "Your sister helped us figure it out," or "She looked into it for us." Not suggested, not advised, handled. One night over dinner, Dad mentioned he was thinking about replacing the old car in the driveway. Before I could even comment, Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we'll ask your sister first." She knows what makes sense. That tiny sentence hit harder than it should have. We'll ask your sister, like she was the authority, like the rest of us were just waiting for approval. I tried to brush it off, but a quiet resentment started building under the surface. Not loud anger, just a steady pressure in my chest every time her name came up. The worst part was how normal she acted. She never brought up money around me. Never mentioned the documents or the phone calls. If anything, she treated me exactly the same as always, asking about work, helping with random problems, texting dumb memes late at night, which somehow made it more frustrating, because if she really was managing everything behind the scenes, it meant she had been doing it for years without saying a word, and I couldn't decide what bothered me more, the secrecy, or the possibility that my parents trusted her with everything, and never even considered trusting me. Eventually the curiosity stopped feeling harmless, it started feeling personal, so one evening, when my sister invited me over for dinner, I decided I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. Her apartment looked exactly the same as always, clean counters, quiet lighting, the faint smell of something cooking in the oven. She handed me a drink and asked about work like nothing in the world was complicated. For a while, I played along, then I finally said it, so. When did you start managing mom and dad's money? She paused, not dramatically. Just a small pause while she set a spoon down on the counter. What do you mean? She asked. I leaned back in the chair. I saw the documents in the garage. Bank transfers. Loans. Everything's in your name. Her shoulders stiffened slightly. That's not really what it looks like, she said carefully. That answer didn't help. Then explain it, I replied. For a few seconds she didn't say anything. She just wiped her hands on a towel and stared at the counter like she was deciding how much to say. Finally she sighed. They asked me to help with some things, she said. Paperwork. Payments. It's complicated. That vague explanation felt like confirmation, so they just give you money whenever you need it? I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Her head snapped up. That's not what's happening. Then what is? Another pause. Longer this time, and instead of answering, she did something that instantly made my assumptions feel justified. She shook her head. I can't get into it, she said quietly. It's not my place to explain. The words landed like a door closing, not my place, which, to me, sounded exactly like someone protecting a secret. The truth came out a week later, and not because anyone planned to tell me. Dad called me late one night, not his usual casual check-in. His voice sounded tired, slower than normal. Can you come by tomorrow? He asked. We need to talk about something. When I got to their house the next afternoon, both of my parents were sitting at the kitchen table. My sister was there too, quiet, hands folded in front of her like she'd been waiting for this moment. The air in the room felt heavy. Dad cleared his throat. Your sister thinks we should explain some things. I glanced at her. She didn't look triumphant. If anything, she looked uncomfortable. Mom stared at the table while Dad continued. Years ago, we made a mistake with some financial decisions. He said it carefully, like the sentence had been rehearsed. Bad investments. Some loans we shouldn't have taken. It piled up faster than we expected. I frowned. Okay. But what does that have to do with everything? My sister said quietly. She finally looked at me. The transfers you saw. They weren't them giving me money. I felt my stomach tighten. They were payments going the other direction. I blinked. What? Dad rubbed his face with one hand. We were close to losing the house, he admitted. The words hung in the air. My sister spoke again, her voice steady but low. So I took over the accounts. Consolidated the loans. Negotiated payment plans. A lot of the debt had to be moved under my name because their credit was already damaged. I stared at her, trying to process it. All those years. You were fixing it. She nodded once. Silence filled the kitchen. Then she added something that hit harder than everything else. They didn't want you to know. For a while, nobody said anything. I sat there staring at the table, trying to line this version of reality up with the one I'd been carrying around in my head for years. The two didn't fit, all the praise, all the comments about her being responsible. The check. The bank documents. The quiet phone calls, none of it had meant what I thought it meant. You almost lost the house?" I finally asked. Dad nodded slowly, like it physically hurt to admit it. Mom still wouldn't look up. "It got bad," he said. "Worse than we ever told anyone." My eyes shifted to my sister. "You took all that on?" She shrugged a little, but it wasn't casual the way her shrugs used to be. This one looked heavy. "Someone had to organize it," she said. "Creditors don't wait for families to figure things out." The sentence sounded almost clinical, like something she'd repeated to herself 100 times. Suddenly all those balcony phone calls made sense, the late-night messages. The tension I'd heard in her voice. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing the back of my neck. "So the money they give you?" "Debt payments," she said simply. "Technically they're paying me back." Technically, that word stuck with me, because the truth was, they'd never explained any of this to me. Instead, they let me believe she was the golden child who somehow earned more trust, more help, more approval. I glanced at my parents. "You could have told me," I said quietly. Mom finally looked up, her expression tight. "We didn't want you worrying." But that answer didn't feel complete, because keeping the secret hadn't just protected me, it had also left me spending years quietly resenting the one person who had been carrying the problem the entire time. And the strangest part, my sister didn't look relieved that the truth was out. She looked tired. The drive home that night felt longer than usual. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to find some version of it where I hadn't spent years building resentment over something that was never what I thought it was. Every memory looked different now. The praise from my parents hadn't been about favoritism. It had been relief. She was the one holding the situation together while they quietly tried to repair the damage, and the check I'd seen on the couch, not a reward, a repayment. But even knowing all that didn't magically untangle the feeling sitting in my chest, because here's the thing nobody in the kitchen had really addressed. She had taken on their debt. Their stress. Their constant phone calls. Years of it, and what did she get for it? Quiet recognition behind closed doors. And the reputation of being the responsible one. Meanwhile, I'd spent those same years being compared to her without ever knowing the reason. A few days later, I called her. "I'm sorry," I told her. There was a pause on the line. "For what?" she asked. "For assuming things." She let out a small breath, almost like a laugh but not quite. "It's fine," she said. "You weren't supposed to know." That sentence stuck with me long after the call ended, because part of me still wondered if keeping me in the dark had really been about protecting me. Or protecting my parents from admitting how much they'd needed her. And now I keep coming back to the same uncomfortable question. If someone quietly carries a family's mistakes for years, does that make them more responsible, or just the one who never had the chance to say no?